And notice what nobody was talking about there was a Palestinian state. It was Israel normalizing relations. So that's where, things stood. And so, even though there was this policy disagreement about Palestine between Biden and Netanyahu, Netanyahu briefed this same plan, this India Middle East Economic Corridor, when he spoke at the General Assembly at the United Nations in September. He was up there bragging about the role that Israel would play in this. This was the vision that everybody had. Nobody's talking about now. That's dead. That's dead. What everybody's talking about right now is a Palestinian state. But the Israelis, Netanyahu, first of all, understand that he is the head of the Likud party. Now, there's been a lot of controversy lately about, from the river to the sea. I guess we're not allowed to say that. I hope I don't get you banned on any of your platforms. But what people don't understand is that Hamas, which was an entity whose creation was facilitated by Benjamin Netanyahu himself in the 1980s and 1990s, didn't invent that. The Likud party did. That the 1977 charter of the Likud party basically is, from the river to the sea, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean will be greater Israel. Actually, they take it up to, the Tigris and Euphrates, and they go to the Nile. I mean, they want it all. No Palestinians are supposed to be Eretz Israel, the greater Israel, the biblical Israel. That's the Likud's position. And I think there it is. Between the sea and Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty right there. From the river to the sea, baby. Western Eretz Israel. Please, people need to understand what Eretz Israel is. It's biblical Israel. And the Likud party will never give it up. And that's where we're at right now. So while the Biden administration is talking about a two-state solution, hell, everybody in the world's talking about a two-state solution. There was an interesting interview done in England. I don't know if you saw it, where Sippy, and I can't pronounce her last name, but she's the ambassador of Israel to the United Kingdom. And she's asked about a two-state. She says there will be no two-state solution. Israel refuses to allow it. Israel will not allow it. And not only that, she's saying all the Palestinians got to go. They got to go. They're done. They're finished. So, that's where the Israelis are on this. So there's this big divide between the Biden administration and the Israelis, between the world and the Israelis. Israel is truly isolated right now, like they've never been before. And it's dangerous for them right now because normally the pro-Israeli lobby has a lock on the American body politic, meaning that it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, only good things are going to happen for Israel from the Americans. That ain't happening now because Israel has stopped being something that politicians look to and say it promotes us, it helps us. Israel is hurting the United States. That India Middle East Economic Corridor that was supposed to, Israel was supposed to like, it was supposed to help us compete against China's Belts and Roads Initiative. That was the whole purpose of it. Although I think you and I have talked about this before. The railroads in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they're supposed to make this linkage. China built them, and China would be the ones building, and they did the ports and everything. So it just shows the stupidity of the Biden administration. But the point is, they actually believe that in order to be relevant in the world today, we have to be engaging in a positive fashion with the collective, with the global South, with the developing world, with the I guess you take the G7 out of the G20 with the G13. The non-G7 members have to be on our side. We lost them all, and it's hurting us right now. We are in a horrible position geopolitically on a global stage. And for the first time in modern times, Israel is seen as a detriment to America, that Israel is hurting America, which means that the Biden administration has got to divorce itself from Benjamin Netanyahu and his far right-wing coalition, governing coalition, which is even further to the right than the Likud party. These are fanatics. These are nuts. These are guys openly advocating genocide, the mass slaughter of Palestinians. So the Biden administration has basically said, you got to go. They got to go. And you can't keep doing what you're doing in Gaza. You got to stop dropping bombs on civilians and all this stuff. So they've given them, I think, till the end of the year to wrap up their military campaign. But here's the bad news for the Israelis. You could have 20 years, to wrap up your military campaign, and you're still going to get your butts kicked, because you are getting your butts kicked right now. If you look at a couple things, the Battle of Iwo Jima, big Marine Corps battle. We stormed an island where the Japanese had dug a whole bunch of tunnels into Mount Suribachi and underneath along the whole island. And so the Japanese were underground as the Marines are advancing above ground. And the Japanese would pop up here and there and pop, 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 kill Marines. And they killed a lot of Marines. I mean, we won that battle, but we lost a lot of Marines. It was a very bloody battle. Nothing easy about it. But that was smooth, flat desert. And the Japanese are still popping up and taking us. Now, let's take Stalingrad, where, if you look at the fight for Red October Factory, for instance, the Germans came in and they bombed it into rubble. And then the Red Army came in and dug into that rubble. And the Germans brought their best combat engineer troops to do the final assault, and they got slaughtered because the Red Army was just dug in. You couldn't dig them out. Look at Monte Cassino, the battles in the Italian Alps, where we leveled an ancient abbey, flattened the village, and the German paratroopers just dug in, and they withheld massive assaults by the Americans, by the Poles, by the New Zealanders, by the British, the Indians. Everybody tried to take it. They couldn't because they're dug in. Now you combine the two. Combine a collapsed urban environment with tunnels underground, but not just a couple tunnels, 500 kilometers worth of tunnels. And so as the Israelis advance in, Hamas is just waiting for them, popping up, pap, 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 pap. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. Over 100 Israeli soldiers have been killed by Hamas so far. And that's not a huge number. I mean, it's a big number, but it's not a huge number. The number you have to pay attention to is the 5,000 wounded, because normally you're looking at wounded, a 1 to 3 ratio. So for every dead guy, there's 3 wounded. But here you got 100 dead guys, 5,000 wounded, over 2,000 of whom are permanently disabled. These are guys who have no legs, no arms, spinal injuries. Their brain's been garbled. They're going to be pooping into a colostomy bag for the rest of their lives because their guts got ripped out. I mean, this is the reality of this fight. And the Israelis are scared to death. It's not being widely reported here in the West, but they are withdrawing from areas in Gaza because they can't hold it. The Hamas is just taking them down. They're not succeeding. They're scared. They got guys, they've had to relieve battalion commanders because the battalion commanders refused to advance, refused to fight. They had to fire them, kick 2 of them out of the military. The battalions themselves are saying, we don't want to do this. The best battalions, like the Golani Brigade, are just getting the snot kicked out. They just lost a battalion commander right now. He's dead. A lot of officers are dying. Heavy percentage of officers. Because why? Because the enlisted men, these reservists, these fat, stupid, lazy reservists who don't know how to fight, don't have the motivation. So what happens is the officers have to come forward and lead them aggressively. And when the officers lead them aggressively, bam, they die in high numbers. And then you got to replace them with what? The Israelis are getting slaughtered. They're getting butchered. They're not winning. And so when Biden says you have until the end of the year to wrap this up, the Israelis are like, we can't do this. This is why in the war cabinet for Netanyahu, he can't take anything to a vote. For instance, they just debated whether or not to have a ceasefire to begin the process of hostage release again, because that's a big political hot button in Israel right now. Netanyahu is against it. He doesn't want to do it. If he put it for a vote, he would lose because all the others are saying, "Nah, man, we're getting our butt." The military's going, "Boss, we ain't winning this. We ain't going to win this. We need to stop this because it's humiliating us." When the world becomes aware of that the IDF can't win this fight, the notion of our superiority and supremacy will be shattered forever. But Netanyahu does it. The thing about the hostages is interesting because it turned out, I think we've talked about this before, but we got in a lot of trouble, at least I did, because I was somebody who said, that what Hamas did on October 7th was a military raid, not an act of terrorism. It was a well-executed military raid. No, it was an act of terrorism, Scott. 1,200 innocent Israelis were slaughtered by Hamas. No. Fully a third of those were
Don't
soldiers.
tell Piers Morgan that.
I'll tell Piers Morgan head to his face. I'll say it straight up. so close I'll be spitting on him when I speak if he wants. But the point is, a third of them were military, which means that Hamas kicked the living snot out of the Israeli military that morning. But the rest of them, they weren't killed by Hamas. And the Israelis have finally admitted it. And I'm not talking about admitting it on the periphery, where you have a hostage, being released saying, no, man, they fired in the building. They killed everybody. It was the Israelis who did that. Or Apache helicopters appeared and they just indiscriminately killed everything. The official Israeli government report is, yeah, we probably killed most of those people, but we don't want to investigate because it would be too harmful to the psychology of the Israeli nation at this time to know the truth. So we're shutting this thing down. We're not going to talk about it anymore. But I'm here to tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, that all those party revelers, they weren't killed by Hamas. Some of them were, of course. I'm not pretending that Hamas didn't kill anybody. They did. But the majority of them died in a crossfire between Hamas and the Israeli police, where the Israeli police fired indiscriminately into the mob. They panicked. They brought in the helicopters, and the helicopters flattened everything. Hamas, the fight, they didn't discriminate. And when the Israeli army finally pushed into the kibbutzes, and you had hundreds of Israelis in their houses, held hostage by Hamas fighters who, for the most part, were prepared to exchange the hostages for their freedom, the tanks fired into the buildings and killed everybody. The Israeli army killed 80+% of the Israeli civilians who died on October 7th. And that's the God's honest truth, which again underscores the incompetence of the Israeli military and the political problem that Netanyahu faces. They were releasing hostages. They had that 6-day pause, and hostages were being released, exchanged for prisoners, etc. And then they stopped. Since then, Israel has recovered the bodies of 2 hostages who appeared to have been killed by the Israelis. They launched a hostage rescue mission to get a 3rd guy. It failed. The hostage was killed by the Israelis who lost a couple of their elite commandos in the process. And so now the hostage families are going to Netanyahu saying, wait a minute, did you implement the Hannibal Doctrine against civilians? The Hannibal Doctrine, of course, being the notion that Israel will kill a soldier before they allow that soldier to be taken prisoner by a terrorist organization, Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. Hannibal Doctrine. So it's pretty tough. So here, give you an example of real life stuff, guys. Hamas went in and they captured an Israeli intelligence facility. That was where the Israelis had their human intelligence capability, right there on the guy, because they never thought Hamas was coming over. So they kept it nestled right up there. And so all the servers that have all the names and the contact information and the history of reporting of all the human intelligence assets inside Gaza, and the case officers who run these guys are right there in that building. And Hamas captured it. And they took all the servers. That's why the next day, a whole bunch of Palestinian informers were dead, because Hamas went, oh, you've been spying for Israel? Pop, dead. The Israelis went blind, which is another reason why their military campaign's suffering, right? Because they don't have any intelligence. They lost everything. They lost the human intelligence. They lost the SIGINT, because the 8200 unit was likewise attacked. Their servers taken. But these guys captured some of the case officers, the spy runners, and they're moving them into Gaza. And the Israelis are going, kill them all. And so they were sending their helicopters and everything in to stop this guy, literally slaughtering Israeli civilians because it's indiscriminate. They said, kill everybody, because we can't let Hamas get their hands on these people. The Hannibal Doctrine. Israel lost control of the Gaza defense belt, and they lost custody of their own people. So the Israeli military was implementing the Hannibal Doctrine, full broad spectrum on everybody. They killed everybody because they couldn't allow Hamas to capture these people. All those Israeli soldiers, the females right now, you have the Israelis saying they're holding on to female hostages. Dude, they're prisoners of war. They're women who worked in the Combat Intelligence Corps. They primarily come from a battalion called Unit 414. These are the wall watchers. These are the girls that sat there at the computers and watched all the imagery. They had the remote control cannons that could fire. And sadly, they weren't issued any weapons. So when Hamas broke through and came into their base, all these girls could do is run into a room. And there was a video. It's a very sad video because you're watching this, and these are girls in their night clothes, in their underwear, and they're just sitting and they're scared to death because it's boom, 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 and Hamas is coming closer. And what happened is Hamas came in, threw in grenades, and killed about 80% of them. So all those beautiful young women who were there, they're dead, they're wounded. The survivors were captured, taken in. These girls know how Israel spied on Hamas. So Hamas is getting great intelligence from them. And so Israel's saying, you got to release them. And Hamas going, they ain't getting released. They're soldiers. They're these aren't, this isn't mom and pa and the little kid that we took as a negotiating chip. These are soldiers, and you're going to pay a heavy price to get them back. And so you put all this together and you see the total untenable position that Benjamin Netanyahu's in. And now we add to it that Biden has told Netanyahu, not only will you stop doing what you're doing by the end of the year, but you got to go. And this is something that Biden has told Netanyahu. Your government at a minimum has got to go. We can't tolerate these people anymore, and you've got to go. Benjamin Netanyahu is operating on a 4% approval rating. And that number is going to be even lower now that the truth's come out about the Hannibal Doctrine and the fact that the vast majority of those civilians killed on October 7th were killed by the Israeli military. He's finished. He's done. And this is the reality. When the new year starts, we're going to be probably dealing with a new Israeli government that's going to have to accept the reality that Israel's isolation, that Netanyahu's foisted upon it by this ridiculous campaign, this mass murder, this genocide, has become America's isolation, and America won't tolerate it anymore. And we're going to see the necessity of Israel to form a government capable of accepting the inevitability of a Palestinian state.
Yes. And Scott, I wanted to get your comments further on some developments that it appears the Defense Department, the State Department appear to be very concerned about, and maybe even quietly panicking about, which is the situation in the region as a whole. So you have the Red Sea, you have Yemen's armed forces led by the Houthis, essentially conducting regular captures, strikes. Norwegian vessels have been hit, French vessels. There have been many targets thus far, and some vessels have actually been captured. And then you also have a situation, I'll pull up the report, in Iraq. And the resistance, what's called the Islamic resistance in Syria and Iraq, have been quite active as well. So let me just pull this up. So here's a report from the Associated Press. Iraq scrambles to contain fighting between U.S. troops and Iran-backed groups. This is what they always say. They're Iran-backed groups fearing Gaza spillover. But essentially, it's the resistance in Iraq and Syria, which have committed dozens and dozens of attacks on U.S. installations, bases, etc. So this appears to be more and more of a concern for the United States side. What is your, I guess, assessment of this particular aspect of the conflict, the regional situation in particular, how Yemen, how these resistance forces in Iraq and in part Syria, and of course just broader regionally, how this has been playing out, and how does it affect the military situation in the conflict overall?
Well, let's start with Yemen and the Houthi. First of all, let's just make it clear that while Iran, I apologize if I've mispronounced that. I'm American, so it is what it is. I don't mean any insult by it. But the Iranians have been, they create something called the axis of resistance. And, it stretches from Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, through Syria, into Iraq with the pro-Iranian militias, Iran, and then down into Yemen with the Houthi. And Iran, provides, and I guess Hamas is thrown into that now too. And Iran provides financial resources and in some cases direct military assistance. With Yemen, there's no doubt that Iran has been providing Yemen with the resources necessary to take on Saudi Arabia in a war by proxy, ballistic missiles, drone capabilities, etc. But the Houthi do what the Houthi want to do. It ain't like the Houthi say, oh, big brother Iran's got to tell us what to do. The Houthi woke up and said, screw it, baby, we're going to war. We're fighting in defense of the Palestinians. And Iran's going, no, don't. We're trying to manage this escalation here. We don't want you. But the Houthi are the wild boys of the Middle East, and they're just like, yeehaw, go. And they start firing missiles, they firing stuff. And now they've done something that really hurts, is because this, I guess it's a Strait of Al Babel or I can't pronounce it, but the little narrow thing on the, where the Red Sea comes into the Gulf of Aden, there's a narrow little passageway where all the ships have to go through, and they're in the range of everything the Yemenis have. And the Yemenis have said, as long as Israel's doing what they're doing in Gaza, no shipping will be allowed to go through if it's heading to Israel. And they're sink. I don't think they think it's sunk stuff, but they've hit stuff, put it on fire, they've captured stuff. And so now what's happening is that, ships are very expensive and the owners don't like their ships to catch on fire or be captured. And so they're diverting all the way around Africa, coming in the other way to get to Israel. And that's very, very expensive. It's costing Israel tens of billions of dollars of denied economic activity. And so the Houthi are actually very sophisticated here. This is a very sophisticated weapon that they've dealt the Israelis. And the United States is going, damn it, now we got to respond here. But if we respond there, we got to take those forces and move in here. And remember, we've already said we don't have any money for this. All those aircraft carriers that we deployed to scare Hezbollah, it's basically eating up the Navy's operational budget, meaning money that was supposed to be set aside for training and other things is now being spent on these operations, which means there's no training taking place. There's other things that aren't happening. And now you want to expand naval operations into this area. Where's the money coming from? This is why the U.S. Navy is calling up the Australians and saying, hey, get some of your ships up here right now. We need you to take care of the security. And the Australians are going, no, we're not going to do that. This is a problem for the United States because we don't have the force structure to do everything at once. And so the Houthi have dealt a huge blow, not only to Israel, but to the United States. And the only way that we could rectify this is to go to war against them. But the Saudis have been using American-provided aircraft and American intelligence since 2014, and they haven't beat the Houthi yet. And then again, who's going to pay for this? Where's the money coming from? We're going to have another war in Yemen, a forever war. And none of these wars have gone well for us. And if we go to war against the Houthi, the whole region's going to blow up. The axis of resistance will just go haywire. These militias that are firing against American forces in Iraq and in Syria, believe it or not, are holding back. They could do a lot more. They're simply reminding the Americans that they're here and that there will be price to be paid so long as this conflict goes on, that nothing is free. And what has the United States done? We've responded very minimally. We've bombed a couple warehouses associated with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command, but we've bombed those warehouses before in I guess Abu Kamal across the river from Al-Qaim. We've been hitting that place, the same place over and over again. It's like the Iranians go, okay, rebuild the warehouse so America can bomb it next week, kind of thing. We're not doing real harm on the Iranians because we don't want to. If we do real harm on the Iranians, then they get involved. And now we're talking about an expansive conflict, and we only got 2,000 guys in that region. That ain't a lot of guys. And if the whole region blows up, those 2,000 guys can be swamped. They can be overrun. And now we have to divert all our air power into that area. Again, who's going to pay for it? We don't have a budget for this. And now we're doing that. And this war gets out of control, spins out of control. This is a nightmare scenario for the Biden administration. And if it blows up enough, because another area that everybody's worried about is what's going to happen with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has done a masterful job of escalation management. They have been, I mean, it's like the Israelis, are sitting there in this boxing match with Hamas, and Hamas split the eye, and Israel's bleeding here, and Hezbollah is just sitting there once in a while going, "Let me rub some salt in that wound for you. And come on, get out of here." Boom, boom, pow, and they get salt in that wound. Stop it. Hezbollah is just sitting there pissing them off because they're really, really putting, and it's hurting them. Remember how sophisticated I said the Houthi were? Understand that most of what Hezbollah is doing against Israel is economic in nature. It's the battle Hamas wanted to fight. Are they taking losses? Yeah, I can guarantee you this, though. Israel, we're in a situation that's almost Vietnam-like, where, we become so obsessed in Vietnam to body counts that we kill an entire village and we call it Viet Cong. We killed 900 confirmed Viet Cong, KIA. No, you just killed 900 old men, women, and children. You didn't kill 900. Okay, but the Israelis right now are killing every Palestinian male of a certain age that gets killed as a Hamas fighter. No, I think Hamas has lost several hundred fighters. They have, between them and the other ones, 80,000. So there's a lot of guys left to fight and die. And Israel doesn't have enough troops to do this. The amount of dead, we know that the Israelis suppressed the figures early on up in against Hezbollah. How do we know that? Because an Israeli doctor went into the refrigerated morgue, opened it up, and said, boom, there's more bodies in here, just this morgue, than what Israel's admitted to losing right here. But they're not counting these bodies yet because it's too demoralizing. The Israelis are in one of these. It's like, why do the Ukrainians lie about their numbers? Because if the truth gets known, morale will collapse. So the Israeli government has made a strategic decision to suppress casualty figures so that they don't collapse the morale, the support of the Israeli people. I don't know what the true Israeli casualties are. I do know that the numbers they put out don't jive against the video evidence. Now, there's no guarantee. First of all, a lot of the explosions we see on these Israeli tanks are reactive armor. So you're going to get a nice big explosion that isn't necessarily resulting in a mobility kill or even damage. So it's, there's the likelihood is many of these explosions aren't, achieving a hard kill, and the troops inside are surviving intact. Maybe a little shooken up, going to have headache and hearing loss, but you're going to be okay. So you can't just sit there, well, because they hit all this is happening. No, these tanks are good tanks. They're survivable tanks. They're designed to do this, but they are losing a lot more tanks than this is why they had to stop reselling their old Merkava 3 tanks that they were going to sell to Morocco and others. They had to keep them because they have to organize new reserve armored battalions to make up for the losses that they're suffering in Gaza. But now this fight's turned into an infantry fight, and the Israeli infantry just isn't up to the task. I'm not, I'm an old fat man thousands of miles away from the battlefield, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I could do it any better than the Israelis. When I was younger, I could do it a hell of a lot better, and so could my Marines. These guys aren't very good. Russian people Russian commanders who fought in Mariupol, fought in Bakhmut, are looking at the Israeli tactics that they're using, and they're saying if they took this up against a real army, they'd all be dead. But they're not fighting they're fighting Hamas. It's a different kind of fight, but these aren't very good soldiers. They're not, they don't have the discipline. They can't. How can you be, let's just put it this way. If you're a 23-year-old major, you ain't very good.
You're right.
Okay. Major should be around, 32, 35, so that's a whole nother decade of experience you need to have before you're a major. If you're a 19-year-old sergeant, you ain't very good at all.
When I was I'll say this, in law enforcement, when I became captain, I was 36. And I was the youngest captain in the state of Maryland. Of all of the, various police departments that the state has, I was the youngest one. I got major at 38. And that was fairly young. right? Because it takes a lot of years just to know, for one thing, all the policies and procedures. What happens if this happens? You can't like, hold on, let me go get the manual. You have to know, oh, if this happens, notify this person, do this, call this person. People are going to look at you. This happened. What do we do? You have to know that stuff, rote memory, right? You ain't going to learn that in a couple of years. So even in law enforcement, you're not going to find a bunch of captains and majors running around even in their late 20s. Usually it's their late 30s. The guys are going to have some gray starting to show up here before you start seeing those oak leaves and train tracks start to show up on their collar, right? So you can call somebody a major, but when you just stick them out there, and of course, in the rubble, let's be honest, if we're fighting in the rubble and I'm Hamas, I'm looking for oak leaves and stripes. I'm looking for the guy in that kind of environment. I'm looking for the people with rank to shoot first.
Well, you know why they have majors that are 23 years old? Because, look, I got promoted to captain when I was 28 years old. Okay, one thing I learned to become a captain is that the answer is staff sergeant. First thing, hey, Cap, what about this? Good question. Staff sergeant, hey, Gunny, come here. What's the answer to that question? Because I'm just 28. I may have captain rank, but I don't know. I mean, I was honest enough to say, I don't know. Gunny, staff sergeant, sergeant, corporal, lance corporal, somebody come and help me, please, because I don't know the answer. But that's okay, because I had experienced Marines who would then come in and say, hey, Captain, this is what we think that. And then I would sit there and think about it and come up with an answer. But what's happened with the Israelis, they don't have that. They don't have gunner. They don't have 15-year gunnery sergeants. They don't have 10-year staff sergeants. They got 19-year-old sergeants. So what that means is the tasks that would be assigned to these experienced NCOs in the American system have to be assumed by officers. So they have majors, 23-year-old majors, doing the work of a staff sergeant. It's a totally screwed up system where they're officers. They're saying this is the leadership ethic of the Israelis. No, it ain't. It's called stupidity. It's called a conscript army. It's called what happens when you don't have a professional army. And just keep in mind that the vast majority of these Israelis out there fighting are young kids with no military experience. These aren't guys that have been in the military for 10 years, 15 years, who've been there, done it, got a couple T-shirts. These are guys, this is their first experience, and they're not trained well. They didn't go. I saw a comment in there about a guy saying, I lived at, I was stationed at Fort Hood, but I lived at 29 Palms, or he lived at Fort Ord. He talked about Reforger, the reinforcement of forces in Germany. That's an exercise that we did during the Cold War, where we would literally every year, or sometimes twice a year, fly 10,000 soldiers out to join up with pre-positioned equipment. And within less than 12 hours of landing, they were in the field with their equipment going through combat drills, because that's the way we had to fight with the Soviets coming across the border. You had to land, jump in, and go. Be ready to fight now. And the only way you could do that is by training 24/7. You didn't even become good at Reforger. I would ask this guy to ask me that. Were you good the first time you did Reforger? No. Why? Because it was all new. You're going, Christ, this is difficult. I don't understand what's going on. You only became good at Reforger about the fourth time you did it, when you went, okay, I know what to expect. I can anticipate. My brain's not going to get bogged down. I can boom. And suddenly things are working the way they're supposed to work. That was the whole purpose of it. But 4 Reforgers meant that you were in for, 2, 3, 4 years before you became good at it. Israeli conscripts in for 2.5 years, half of that time spent just getting basic training. They aren't good at anything. They're not good at anything. And I'm just saying that with all seriousness. They suck. They're good at beating up girls, beating up 10-year-old boys, breaking arms, shooting old men, but they're not good at war. They're not good at it all. You can't even be good at tank operator. Think about that. Who's driving the damn Merkava tanks? Guys have been driving for 10 years? No, guys that got straight out of armor school, and now they're in a Merkava tank in one of the most demanding environments in the world. They don't know how to use cover. They don't know anything about what they're doing. They're coming in there scared. Bam, they get hit. Now what do? Where's their infantry support? Did they practice that tactic? half the people out there that have worked with the American tank infantry team knows what happens the first time you go out there and you try to work with the Bradley and dismounted guys. You screw it up badly. You lose every time. Why? Because the enemy's going to kick your ass because you don't know what you're doing. But then you take that loss, you come back and you talk about it, and you say, okay, hey, rather than you guys deploying here and getting overextended and me coming in without you here, okay, we're going to come in. Get that guy deployed first. Okay, you got that field of fire. Come in here, boom. Okay, get the fire suppression down. Okay, now move in. Now do this. Now you're thinking tactically. It takes a long time to do that. These Israelis don't think tactically. Plus, they're emotion driven. When your strategic purpose is to inflict pain on the Palestinians, that's what you're doing. These Israelis are more intent on making TikTok videos showing them desecrating mosques, burning schools, embarrassing, humiliating Palestinian women than they are focused on the actual business of war. If you're not, I was told, I'll just leave this. I had a Marine captain once drive me from, I took a ride from Washington, D.C. back to Quantico. As we're driving there, we're talking, and he's like, you know, you're going to be a career Marine. I'm like, yeah, it looks like it. And he's like, okay, hey, what do you see out here? And I'm driving through in this beautiful land of Northern Virginia. And I went, I don't know, you know, some hills, some town. He goes, you ain't a professional warrior yet. He goes, when you look at that, I want you to see, you know, the best route up the hill, where the covering fire position is. I want you to be looking at, you know, cover, concealment. You have to be thinking this every time you go. We told that same thing with firefighters. You know, I was drive through with my firefighters in town. I'd say, what do you see? Oh, street. And I said, no. You have to see single wall construction. You have to see this. You have to look in there and see the car. Are there children's toys out in the front yard? So if you show up, are there going to be kids in that house? You know, is there evidence of animals? I mean, you got to look at this kind of stuff. When you got to think firefighting. Where's the fire hydrant? What's my best approach so I don't block the ladder coming in? You know, where are the lines? If you're not thinking like that, you're not a professional. As a Marine, I literally, to this day, I look at everything from a perspective of tactical advantage, operational, logistical sustainability, because I was trained that way. These Israelis, they don't think like that. They don't think like that at all. They're not very good at what they do. And Hamas lured them into a trap of their own making, and Hamas is kicking the living snot out of them.
If you got a couple minutes, you got enough for one more subject? Maybe we'll
yeah.
10 minutes. Okay. Let me share two things with you. Let's look at it. Number one, I'm going to do two. Here's the first one. Break-in. Marianne Williamson claims primaries are rigged, accuses 4 states of bias towards Joe Biden. So what we got is Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Massachusetts. Only Biden's name will appear on the ballot. They will not allow anyone. The Democratic Party has decided those 4 states are Joe Biden's. If Garland Nixon, if Scott Ritter, if somebody who's lived in that state the entire life, if they're beloved by everyone and they say, you know what, I think I want to give it a shot. Sorry, Joe Biden's the only person. It's like we hear about those banana republics. Hey, vote for whoever, and they put one name on the ballot. Now, let's do one other. One more article. All right. Republicans threatened to take Joe Biden off the ballot in states they control, right? And why are they doing that? Because of a Colorado ruling that Donald Trump is not permitted to be on the ballot this year. So what we got is a Democratic Party where Biden, let's face it, he's done. We watched him the other day say that 65 years ago, on October 7th, 65 years ago, he said this. I saw the video that Hamas attacked Israel. His father, he literally said, my father went back to the kibbutz to look for his family. His Irish Catholic father, who died 20 years ago, apparently was living in a kibbutz. 65 years / days. It was madness. And the Democratic Party has said, in our primaries, you can only vote for this guy. Meanwhile, as far as the Republicans are concerned, Donald Trump, like him, don't like him, it doesn't matter. He has every right. You and I have every right to run. Everybody has every right to run. I'm sorry, if you're a person that wants to vote for Donald Trump, nah, That ain't happening. He ain't on the ballot. To call this a miscarriage of justice is absurd. But it's like I said, now Republicans are saying, and as soon as that happened, I said that we'll take Joe Biden off the ballot in states where they control. Which I disagree with all of it, but I predicted that would happen. We now have a Democratic Party that has become, I don't even know what the word for this is, fascism, to say we're going to take people off the ballots, where our own constituents, they can't vote. You want to talk about a banana republic fascist activity? This is about as bad as I've ever seen it. What are your thoughts on this, Scott Ritter?
No, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, it's over for America. We've become a joke, a tragic joke. Democracy is dead. I mean, it works at the local level to an extent, but again, who puts the names on the ballot? Ask yourselves that. I mean, when you go to the poll on election day and you go, okay, here's the name, who put them there? Did you? Or did the Democratic Party pick somebody? Or did the Republic? See, we become so accustomed to, transferring the responsibilities of citizenship to entities that are unelected, and they get to select for us. So when we go to elect, we're going through the process of thinking we're voting and therefore being a good citizen and we have control, but we're just voting for a preordained outcome, one or the other, picked by somebody else that we have no. We're dead as a society. We are done. I believe in the Constitution, and I believe in constitutional processes. And it's illegal to advocate for violent overthrow of the Constitution. It's illegal to do that. But when the Constitution no longer works, when it's become a fraud, when it's become a joke, maybe Thomas Jefferson had it right. I'm not going to repeat his words because I don't want people to get in trouble. You guys can look them up. You know what I'm talking about. The Tree of Liberty. We're headed in the wrong direction. And I don't know what it takes to get the American people to wake up, because it's not just about getting Joe Biden out of office. It's not just about putting Donald Trump or keeping Donald Trump out of office, whatever you want. It's about the system. The system is corrupt. The system is broken. The system is the one that fools us into thinking that this is a democratic institution. We are a joke, literal joke. We go around and we interfere in the electoral processes of other nations and say, well, you don't run elections right. We don't run elections right. Man, there is no singular. We have 50 states that do 50 different things with different ways, and within the states, different things. We don't know how to run an election. Why is it that Iran can tell you the same day who won the election with a very accurate vote count? Why can Iran count votes better than we can? Why can't we count votes? What is it about the American system that has it so that on the day of a national election, we have to wait a week until we find out what vote counted? Guys, it's broken. The system's broken. And it leads to, I'm not going to jump here and jump on the bandwagon of a stolen election. All right. I'm not saying, what I'm saying though is it leads to the perception of a problem. If at the end of the night, you don't know what's going on, and then things start happening. Now, people tell you that that's not nefarious and all that, but things start happening, then vote counts start changing. That may be just the process of counting votes. I accept that, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't smell right. And it creates the perception of fraud. And the perception of fraud is more destructive to democracy than real fraud, or as destructive, because people start to lose faith in the system. And then this leads to people accepting at face value. I mean, this is revolution generating stuff. You can only have one name on the ballot. Since when did we allow that as Americans? This is where the Minutemen go in the street and say, hell no, we're changing that. But, Bernie Sanders should have done this back when Hillary Clinton had him kicked off, when he won the damn Democratic primary, but the Democratic National Committee stole it from him to install the Queen. He should have stormed the stage and taken over that process and said, you're all fired. I'm in charge now. My people have spoken. It's democratic process. We got more supporters for me than you do for her. I'm the nominee. The Democratic National Committee is fired. The people have now taken over. Wow. That would have been a revolution. That would have been cool. At some point in time, we have to stop playing sheep, literally. The thing about sheep is, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again. You're out there, man, you got a dog. He makes you feel good because he keeps you moving in the right direction. Dog's my friend. And then you got the shepherd out there, and you look at the shepherd. The shepherd's protecting me because the shepherd feeds the dog protects me. And they keep moving me in this direction. I'm happy. And then the shepherd stops. The dog puts me into a pen. Then they open up a pen, and I get pushed in. Shepherd, until I'm slaughtered. That's what we are. We are sheep being led to the slaughter, believing the dog and the shepherd are our friends. They're not. They're just going to kill us. That's the reality of American politics today. We have to be our own shepherd. We have to be our own dog. We've allowed these institutions to be captured by unelected powers, people who operate outside of the control of the American people. And it's we'll pay the price. I mean, we're paying the price, right? This election's a joke, Garland. This election is a joke. Let the people decide. Why is the Colorado Supreme Court jumping in to remove a name from a ballot, making up constitutional law as they go along? Literally manufacturing constitutional law. Nobody asked your damn opinion. It's a Democrat who's pushing this to get Trump off the ballot. I'm not saying I'm supporting Trump. I'm not saying that. I'm saying let the people decide. Let the people of Colorado decide if Donald Trump is their man. And the only way you can do that is to put his name on the ballot if enough people want his name on